right there. So let me just introduce everybody briefly. Oh, Alia's video is gone. Alia's video is back. We see Alia Papageorgiou. Alia is, of course, a former colleague, but currently the vice president of the Association of European Journalists in Brussels, where she is also a colleague since I'm Secretary General. Federico Grandesso is a big-time journalist who's running around the world covering pretty much everything. And at the moment, he's in the heart of the pandemic in Italy, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on there. Hi, Federico. And on my lower left of the TV is Nicholas Wooler. He's managing editor of New Europe, and he's currently in Ukraine, and he's witnessed some strange, or at least worth talking about things on a recent trip to Russia. Maybe I can start with Alia. Just tell us a little bit about the EU response to the pandemic and how she sees things here from Brussels.
Sure. So hopefully you can hear me okay. It's well, since the beginning of all this, I suppose around December 19 is when it officially started, but January and February was when we got into the crux of matters. The European institutions seem to have shifted into daily briefings, daily meetings, the things that they are that are most visually impactful for them, the way that they usually go about changing things when in times of crises. Of course, we've seen everyone's teleworking. It's been, I suppose, is it 2 full weeks now that the European Parliament president self-restricted himself since he had been in Italy. So that was the first time we saw the president of the European Parliament working from teleworking. We have, I mean, if you follow the official channels, there has been wide sweeping coordination that is daily, that has been increasing, that these meetings at the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen doesn't stop working even on the weekend and has a daily meeting every day. And the messaging is very much leading on from her. If some of you may know that she was Germany's defense minister in the past, so her that visualization of someone is in control and taking order and doing the steps for coordinating the whole of the 27 member states now is that's in place, I would say. There's been some interesting restrictions to the daily media press briefing, where you have to sign up for the briefings, you have to document if there's been any signs of illness, etc.
Well, actually, they just stopped those today, so you can no longer access the Berlaymont if you're a journalist. Though if you are a journalist,
last week, yeah.
You can use your press badge and roam the streets and do interviews if you take the precautionary measures. Sorry, Alia, please keep going.
That's fine. I was surprised they were still going last week. It was very interesting. So that's what's happening there. Then in terms of the national level, we've seen many different reactions across the board. In general, the large majority of countries coming out quite early, like Merkel coming out last week, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel coming out and saying this, this is not an issue, a small issue. This will affect millions of people. We have to do something immediately. All the way to Macron's almost daily sermons, including Victor Hugo speeches encouraging the nation with French literature. I don't know if you've seen any of them, but they are very interesting to watch on a daily kind of parapet, styling himself as well, he's at war, actually. He's announced that this is a war. So now there's a defense council going on for most of the day, from what I understood in France. So it's been interesting to see all the different reactions. Of course, I don't know, most people may have heard that the UK and the Netherlands have taken a different position. And that's been a bit stressful for those that we see in the Netherlands and the UK. Apart from, there were some reports, for example, of some Belgians going to the Netherlands to take advantage of the fact that all the cafes and the restaurants hadn't closed. So there's many different societal reactions to what is happening. But from the EU's point of view, I think that's what we're hearing. Of course, the media and society isn't really translating the EU action, I would say, as something that's very effective and decisive. Like there's still a lot of, like for example, today we've had these amazing huge packages released from, or confirmed at least in the last 2 days from the European Central Bank. There's been a 750 billion pandemic emergency purchase program. The European Commission today at 2 confirmed that that the state aid funds can become more flexible so that economies, including Greece, which are still in a special category, for example, can use their stability and growth pact in a flexible way to improve their economies where it's needed. Italy is also being used as a very big example of a country that needs an influx of funds. But it's still it still seems to be like a disconnect between people understanding what the EU can do in this situation, because of course, like EU health ministers, for example, do call each other every day. There's been coordination, but it's hard to see that the society is thinking of what's the EU doing in this case, whereas it seems more of a national issue.
Yeah, so
there's been some criticism.
Obviously, we know that health is not an EU competence, and everyone thinks that there is a whole lot of money in the EU, but the reality is that it's very strictly controlled about how the EU can spend this money. So as you say, there is some type of flexibility trying to be brought in, whereby different kind of funds, the structural funds, are going to be able to be used for this situation. It is an emergency, and they are doing what they can. There was some some money rerouting also happening during the migration crisis. Of course, the numbers aren't going to be as big as we're going to see here with the COVID-19 pandemic. I wanna ask Federico. Federico is in Italy. Wow, I was looking at the picture yesterday with the trucks, with the military trucks, and the comment underneath was that they were transporting dead bodies because there's so many dead bodies in that region of Italy. Federico, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on there and how you've been living the past couple of weeks?
Yes, I'm actually in Padova, which is one area which was locked down first. As we know, it was first Lombardy, Piedmont, Veneto, part of Emilia, and a few areas in Marche. So now the lockdown is complete. And I have news also today. Our president, Luca Zaia, put other restrictions of movement. For example, from today, we cannot anymore go outside for, let's say, just for take a walk or for sport reasons, because unfortunately in the previous day there was a huge mass of people who were going to the park or along the river to have a walk, and this was creating problems, and for this reason we will have more and more restrictions. So yeah, this is a negative point. But we will see, and then the shops are going to be closed on Sunday. This is another thing that there is a debate right now, to close the shops on Sunday. And about the situation in the hospitals, here in Padova, I have to say, thanks God, the situation is still under control. I'm talking about the intensive care unit beds. We still have quite good capacity. Obviously, the images you saw are referring to especially 2 specific provinces in Italy, province of Bergamo and province of Brescia, where the situation is really, really bad. But not all Italy is in the same situation, thanks God. So we have a huge concentration of cases in Lombardy. We have a quite high concentration of cases in Emilia, especially in the northern part, the area of Piacenza, for example. And then you have Veneto in different areas like Verona, Padova, and so on. I think that for the moment in my region, the situation, I mean, it's manageable. What is dramatic, I would say here, is the complete lack of use of something that is essential in this case. If you look at the images in China, it's the possibility to have a mask. The possibility to have a mask is essential because otherwise you cannot go out, you really risk to spread the virus. Masks are really difficult to find here. And I was speaking to several distributors and they told me that these masks were blocked at the border, especially with Germany, and then they disappeared. So I think that we have to all make an effort to make the masks available also in Italy right now, because in Italy we are living a big emergency. We need absolutely to receive more and more masks, not only for the population, but also for the medical staff. I was at the hospital and they were wearing just the simple masks, the one that you use the simple one, very without filter. Normally you should use FFP3 masks to really be safe. I make a proposal. If everybody going out would have the possibility to wear the FFP3, I think that we would have a very good situation for even when we go to the supermarket, we are really protected. So I really hope that Europe can do something in order to help and not to block the provision of masks, but not only masks, also other medical devices are going to be finished soon in the hospitals. So now it's important to stay home, yes, more and more, but it's important also because it's the great war is outside to catch as soon as possible. Everybody is trying to catch medical devices, masks, and so on. But for the moment, Europe has to help Italy on this subject, because this is really I see here it's a key point. Alexander.
So we were talking earlier to a member of the European Parliament, Anna Michelle Asimakopoulou, who told us that she expects the crisis to go anywhere from 2 months all the way up to 18 months. And of course, that's a worst case scenario. And she said she didn't expect us to need social distancing towards the end of those 18 months. But it will take that long for us to come back to what we call back to normal. That was a worst case scenario, of course. I wanna just say that, you know, this issue with the masks has been going from the very start of the pandemic, and we were told that the masks aren't effective in the beginning and that we shouldn't use them. The reality is that it's more likely that they were telling us this so that they can stockpile the masks for the people that need them most. And what we have going on here is that in Italy, the people who need the mask most don't have them. If you look at the news about the amount of doctors who are becoming sick, the statistics are very discouraging because they are the ones that are most exposed. Nicholas Waller, I want to bring you in. You're currently in the Ukraine. You also very recently, just before the pandemic hit, went to Russia. Can you tell us about what's going on in the Ukraine and what you saw in Russia?
I'll try and give you a little bit of an overview also with a lot of the other Soviet republics that are ex-Soviet republics that are dealing with all of this, because we're talking now out of the European Union. Some of them have a good relationship with the EU and some don't. So, for example, here, the numbers are still relatively low in almost all of the countries. But it's a little bit misleading in some way, because there are very few sites in any of the republics where you could get tested. In the case of Ukraine, in the case of Georgia, in the case of Armenia, those countries only have one site. And so if you're talking about a country like Ukraine with 40 million people, a geographic size bigger than Germany, and you only have one place where you can get tested, the numbers are a little bit deceiving. They're still expecting, in fact, I think it's coming in the next couple of days, at least from what I've been hearing yesterday and today, that they're going to be sending about 50,000 kits, test kits, to be distributed around the country. But still, that's not many when you consider the size of the population. The majority of the concerns right now, I would say, are in whether you're talking about in Kiev or Tbilisi or Yerevan or Minsk or whatever. If you are reading Russian language news and that sort of thing, it's mostly the economic effect of what this is going to be. We're talking about countries that have very, very fragile economies. In the case of Ukraine, where they were just slowly starting to have some growth again after several years, following the Crimea and the start of the war in the Donbass and things. Most people are talking about, well, what is this going to do to me economically, rather than whether or not I'm going to get sick. And so I'm not 100% sure if there's what you might call a panic or hysteria over the health concerns, although a lot of people are worried about that. But it's more of a pocketbook issue these days. That's probably going to change. At least my intuition says that'll probably change in the next month. We're also on all the countries, including here. We're all on lockdown. There's no metro. The metros don't work. There's a lot of restriction on movement, even in your own car, between the regions. And I have a feeling, as more and more tests are actually carried out, that you're going to start seeing people a little bit more concerned about the health, behind it, the health worries behind it.
So now are we seeing more and more tests being distributed around the world? They were supposed to have this ultra quick test ready that you can do on the spot rather than need to wait for hours.
Right.
And that's supposed to be something that they were looking to finalize and distribute everywhere. And of course, some countries are going to get it quicker than others. India, everybody's worried about what's going on to happen in India or some of Africa. Despite the hot climate, it's not necessary that the pandemic won't spread substantially. But you were going to tell us about an experience you had in Russia recently.
Yeah. So I was in Russia visiting relatives at the end of January and the beginning of February. And like anybody else, was following the news. I'd been hearing quite a bit about what was going on in Wuhan and China. Right around the time of Christmas is when I first heard this. And with some people that I was discussing this with at the beginning of January, around New Year, there wasn't much of a kind of an opinion, but for most people, they were sort of, oh, well, yeah, I've heard about it. It sounds bad, but it must be something that's kind of isolated. Fast forward to when I was in Moscow. I had some administrative thing that I had to take care of, and I had to go back to the airport that I entered the country and to get my migration card, which you need to enter and exit when the country. I had to go back and get a duplicate of it, and when I went back to get the duplicate, I was told it was in one of the other terminals, and it wasn't the same terminal that I had actually crossed the border in. And okay, so I went over there, and at the airport that I was at, enormous airport, there's lots of terminals, and very large ones. I walked in to go into the terminal, and there was nobody inside. And just some security people and the people that kind of check your bags when you come in, and they were all wearing masks and everything like this. And I thought, okay. And I went down the corridor to where I had to go to this office. And in order to get to the office, you had to go through a glass security gate. And there was a woman there who handed me a mask, and she was wearing a mask and gloves and that sort of thing. And again, I thought, went down to the office, got my card that I needed to, and spoke to the officer that was there. And she was also wearing a protective mask. And I noticed when I was walking down that I saw that there were, the entire terminal was essentially empty. There were no passport control officers or anything like that at any of the kiosks or the little booths where you are when you go through to get your passport stamped and things. And as I was exiting, I actually asked somebody like, "Hey, what's going on here?" To me, it looked like they were doing some sort of repairs or something like that, or renovations, like as if they were getting asbestos out of the building or something like that. And they said, "Oh, this is the terminal where all the flights to and from China go." And I thought, "Oh, okay." And actually, at exactly that moment, I didn't think about it. It was when I was on my way home again. It kind of dawned on me and I thought, "Oh, I wonder if that's connected to what's going on in Wuhan," because it seemed like it was kind of bad and it seemed rather aggressive and things like that. And I went back and I was telling this to my relatives, and it made me think that in order to essentially almost shut down and quarantine an entire terminal like that, and they were still operating flights back and forth, but it was very tightly controlled inside of that terminal. The people who came in and went out were not allowed in or out. That obviously the health authorities and the authorities in Russia were concerned. They must have known that this was something that was not just going to kind of go away, and that it was either highly contagious and very aggressive, that they took the precautions to do that. And that was weeks ahead of what anybody else was doing in the West, long before anybody was even paying attention. And then when I started to see, reactions of Western leaders weeks later, I thought, well, that's interesting. You should have paid attention. Or listen to probably what the Russian health ministry was most likely probably telling their colleagues, because they would have had to have dealt with people transiting in and out of one of the airports in Moscow, whether they were going to the US or Europe or to Britain or whatever. Those people would have had to go back and forth, and so they would have had to communicate with each other. I don't know if
it's an interesting point. And I was traveling back to and from Madrid last days of February, and it was just when the initial wave of concern was setting in Brussels, and I tweeted that no one except one person I saw in the airport in Brussels was wearing a mask as I was making my way to the terminal. And people were tweeting me, asking me whether there is precautions like temperature monitoring for flights coming in. And it didn't look like there were any. The airport responded saying that, "Oh, we're just following the national guidelines from the ministry." But this is, probably a month after when you're talking about,
right?
Where
it would have been about a month,
yeah. Of China into at least that specific airport in Russia were being essentially controlled, or this is what it appears to be.
And I understand their concerns. Anyways, they have a 4,000 kilometer long border that they share with the Chinese. I mean, obviously, it's something that they have to pay attention to on a regular basis. When I was living in Moscow back in the early 2000s, when SARS was going on, there were a lot of precautions that were taken as well too. But I've racked my brain quite a bit. It's 20 years now, but I'm trying to remember if it was that early that they were taking precautionary measures to sort of make sure that people were being protected, and workers were being protected at airports, were being sort of quarantined. I don't remember that, but then again, it's maybe my memory is bad. It was a long time ago, but I think it was a very interesting thing to see, and it became kind of a little bit of a sad reality when weeks later, suddenly, Federico, you and I were talking when everything was kind of breaking out in Italy, and you were sending me messages, and I thought, you know what? If everybody had paid attention a month ago, or even 3 weeks ago, to the fact that this is a very aggressive virus, that who knows what kind of precautionary measures could have been taken to actually stop it early on, or be ready for it at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, Alexander, I was talking about this today on timing. I mean, there's been quite a lot of video this week about those Chinese medical experts that have been visiting Italy and helping them, and then, you know, who's been doing what in what way. And I was thinking today that, but even as effective as the Chinese response has been, where like the Italian numbers have now surpassed the deaths, that we had in China. There was even an initial delay from when, you know, that region was officially, you know, giving figures, and they had started. So it's all about the timing, isn't it? It's
well, I have a little bit of I might have a little bit of a different interpretation of that, seeing how I've lived in this part of the world for half my life. Myself, I would include myself in this thought process as well, in addition to everybody else that you'll talk to around here who lived 20, 30 years ago. The reaction of the Chinese Communist Party to your average Russian or Ukrainian or Georgian or Armenian, to them sounds absolutely identical to the Soviet Communist Party when Chernobyl happened, which was, there's no problem here, we got it under control, there's no issues to discuss, and then we all know what happened after that.
So there's a very interesting article in the Financial Times today about the Taiwan.
Sorry, and the reason why I'm inclined to believe that too is that the body language, the sort of denial process of the Central Committee of the Communist Party in China was so amazingly identical and almost verbatim to what you would have seen in 1986. That it was a bit of a sort of a Chinese version of deja vu in that regard. And so timing is critical, that's true. But also I would tell you that the Chinese communists needed to be a little bit more forthright in actually communicating that to the outside world early on. And it doesn't appear that they were.
Yeah.
So we already know that President Xi was aware, or at least it appeared that he was aware at least a week earlier, before he recognized the world that this back then epidemic was going on. And most interestingly, if you look at the Financial Times today, there's an article, unfortunately it's only for subscribers, but the title is "Taiwan Says WHO Failed to Act on Coronavirus Transmission Warning."
Yes, I saw that article.
Taiwan has been blockaded from various things in various ways, but it did what it could to kind of alert the WHO about the coronavirus transmission being human to human. And this is worth reading because of, Nicholas, what you just said, that the Chinese response was maybe not quite as forthcoming. Of course, the UK and the US also had very delayed responses in recognizing in the pandemic. So that's another thing we need to be aware of.
No, I thought it was fascinating too to see that the Chinese government has now acknowledged that the doctor that originally tried to report the first cases, the one that was first denounced and then told to basically shut up, that now they've said, oh well, actually no, he was right. You know, we're sorry about that.
And he passed away, of course.
And he's dead now. Yes, but this is identical to some of the scientists that were working in Chernobyl who died of radiation poisoning, who were told also, no, you're being alarmist. Be quiet. We have it under control. It's not a problem. And then they're dead. What I was going to add, yes, I saw that piece about Taiwan, which it was quite damning, I thought, to that the Chinese blocked them in terms of being members and that sort of thing. But it also says that the WHO needs to be held responsible here a little bit too. And that's also a sentiment that a lot of people around here have, which is that they would have had adequate information long before they ever declared this a pandemic to actually make a public statement that could have prepared everybody a little bit earlier, saying, this is serious, pay attention to it. And what was it, the 11th of March or something like that, before they actually made a public statement about it. And that's unacceptable. That's just unacceptable.
there is a series of opinion pieces by New Europe's founder Basil Karanakis on neweurope.eu about the Chinese flu, a little bit controversial, but there is some thoughts in there about the Chinese response, how it was, whether it was inadequate, the WHO's response, and that might be worth reading for some of you. Some of you might call it heretic in terms of its views, but there's a lot to learn there. I'm going to close soon. I want to thank you very much, all three of you, for being here, and our last four panelists as well. We heard from Emma Brown from Red Flag. We heard from Jerry Zagoridis from Campaign Lab. We heard from a member of the European Parliament, Anna Michelle Asimakopoulou, Karim Lassina, SVP at AT&T, and of course, you three, who told us and talked to us about the coronavirus pandemic that's going on. Thank you all for being here. Please do stay tuned to neweurope.eu for the latest news on the coronavirus, and of course, everything else that is Europe. And the one last tip I will leave you with is that I've just been made aware earlier, actually by one of our panelists, Jerry, about a World Health Organization WhatsApp chat that you can get the latest numbers, information about how to protect yourself, get your questions answered, travel advice, news, everything you can imagine. If you want to know more about this, all you have to do is add them on WhatsApp and send them a message saying hi. I can text you the phone number that you have to do. Hopefully I won't get in trouble because it does seem like something that's just for the mass public. But if you tweet me at akoronakis, AKORONAKIS, or if you send me a message on Facebook, I'll just send the number to you and you can use it. So thank you all for being here today. I hope to have some of you, if not all of you, back in the coming days and weeks as we do more of these panels, some on the COVID-19 pandemic, some on other things. And I look forward to talking to you all again. Thank you very much, Federico, Alia, and Nicholas.
Thanks. Stay healthy. Take care.
All of you do the same. Yep. Good health.
And thank you again to all of our viewers who have been watching us live on Facebook and on Zoom. Sorry if there were some technical issues along the way, but we're going to be even better next time. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.